أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. Assalamu alaikum everyone. As always, an honor and a privilege to be here amongst you, especially next to Sheikh Zaid, who's studied way more than me, so I'm a little embarrassed being here next to him. But he wants me to go over the slides, and whenever he wants to interject and help me out and add important things to the speech, he'll jump in. Obviously, the topic is about marriage. We're going to look a little bit into the importance of marriage, look into what we should look for in future spouses, and then concentrate on why that's important. And at the end, look into some ways where we could hopefully have a healthy marriage and a healthy relationship. Okay? We're not going to concentrate too much on the importance of marriage because hopefully that's, you guys already accept that, you're here, right? And it's a clear point in Islam. Technical things. Hold on. All right. So, in Islam, marriage, a path of faith and responsibility. In the Quran, Surah Nur, Allah says, "And marry those among you who are single. If they are needy, Allah will enrich them out of His grace." Right. So, very important verse that even if someone's poor, doesn't matter, Allah will take care of them, right? So don't let that be a reason not to get married. Our Prophet ﷺ says, marriage is for my sunnah. Whoever turns away from my sunnah is not of me. So marriage is something that the Prophet did, and we're supposed to emulate him and get married as he did. Another important part of marriage is that it's one of the institutions that's beloved by Allah, right? The Prophet says, no house has been built in Islam more beloved in the sight of Allah than through marriage. That's a beautiful tradition, right? No house has been built in Islam more beloved in the sight of Allah than through marriage. And one of the reasons for that is that it protects faith and morality. How would it protect faith and morality, Shaykhna?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف خلق الله محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Thank you, Sheikh Hamid, for the introduction, and anytime I have a point that I wanted to mention, inshallah, I will interject. In the case that I take too long, you cut me off. Sheikh Hamid was the one that came up with the idea, and of course we are in a happy season celebrating the birthday anniversary of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and also Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam. So Eid Mubarak to you all on this auspicious occasion. The uniqueness of Islam and marriage is that Islam says, if you want to be religious, get married. Other religions say, if you want to be religious, become a celibate, abstain from marriage, suppress that natural desire and urge that you have. And that's what is really, really important for us as Muslims to look at, where our approach to marriage is a positive approach. It's approach of spirituality. Az-zawaj, as the hadith says, Az-zawaj nusf ad-din. Getting married is half of your religion. In the ayah, in the verse that Shaykh Hamid also mentioned, وَأَنْكِحُوا الْأَيَامَ مِنْكُمْ وَالصَّالِحِينَ مِنْ عِبَادِكُمْ وَإِيمَائِكُمْ. Very important verse, encouraging marriage. But the second part is even more important, because usually there are three reasons as to why a person decides not to get married. Reason number one would usually be that they can't afford it. Reason number two, they're studying. And reason number three, they are not ready. All three of these reasons are absurd. And this verse says that if you want richness, if you want wealth, get married. We've understood it completely the opposite of what the Quran says. We believe that we should first of all get an income, have money, and then get married. The Quran says get married and income will come to you, which is exactly why a hadith says من ترك الزواج مخافة الفقر فقد أساء الظن بالله. One who avoids getting married out of fear of poverty is doing su'ul dhan in Allah, is thinking negative of Allah, who is khayr al-raziqeen. So the institution of marriage in Islam is a very, very important institution, which is exactly why, as this second slide says, it is beloved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So as you mentioned that marriage is half of our religion, that comes from a tradition from our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who says one who marries has already guarded half of his religion. Therefore, let him fear Allah for the other half, right? And one of the reasons why we consider it nisfuddin, marriage, is because it protects us from fasad, right? So one of the things that it does is that. The other one is it enables us to live in a peaceful, tranquil household that could facilitate spiritual growth. Right?
An-nikahu sunnati. The Prophet says, An-nikahu sunnati. Nikah is my tradition. فَمَنْ رَغِبَ عَنْ سُنَّتِي فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. One who avoids the sunnah of marriage, the sunnah of the Holy Prophet, is not among us. That's what he says. Marriage does secure a lot of very important things for us as human beings. That's why it says half of your religion will be secured through marriage. فَلْيَتَّقِ اللَّهِ, as the hadith says, فَلْيَتَّقِ اللَّهِ فِي النِّصْفِ الْآخَرِ. Is that it? Once you get married, you become immune from any kind of misguidance or going astray? No, that's not the case. قَدْ أَحْرَزَ نِصْفَ دِينِهِ. You have secured half of your religion, but still there's the matter of being wary of God, there's the matter of having taqwa, which is also very important for a person to continue to develop even after they get married. I was going to say Bachelor of the Year, but...
All right, let's look at the next slide. This slide's an important one here, right? So this one looks at 3 different approaches to marriage, right? So how does one get married, right? And these 3 approaches: forced marriage, love marriage, and arranged marriage, right? So forced marriage is something that does exist in some pockets of our community, but it's something that is shunned by us, but the Western media portrays it as this is basically how we do it, which is a problem, right? The second one, love marriage, is what's the popular form of marriage in the West, right? Where 2 people fall in love and get married. And the third one is arranged marriage, which is where one's family becomes involved in trying to find and select a spouse for their children, right? Now, if we look at forced marriage, I know Sheikh has a lot to speak here, but I'll just briefly touch upon them and then you could jump in. If we look at forced marriage, As it said here, it's invalid in Islam, right? Because one of the conditions is that the bride has to provide her consent to get married to her husband, right? If she doesn't provide consent, the marriage is invalid, right? So that's an important thing. There's from this tradition of the Prophet as well. A previously married woman has more right over herself than her guardian, and a virgin must give her consent. Right? So that's very important. And that pretty much rejects what the Western propaganda against our religion is there. Right? Now I know in some places they might practice differently, but that's what our religion teaches. Now love marriage, that one, two people meet each other outside of the family. They talk with each other, they fall in love with each other, and then later on, they come to the family saying they want to get married, right? With regards to how they interact before marriage, obviously, interacting in such a way where you would fall in love and you'd spend time with each other is discouraged. And also, but if you see each other for the purpose of marriage, and here, most, with the permission of the wali, hopefully that's somewhere involved, right? Then that's where it becomes permitted. Now, some people might say, if you get to know each other really well before marriage, that would make sure that this is the right person for you. But we see in the West, over 50% of marriages in the West from love marriage end up in divorce. So that's obviously statistically not correct. Right? Pretty clear. Third one is arranged marriage. The arranged marriage is, again, a marriage with family involved, where the family helps to find a spouse for their children, but it doesn't mean their children don't have any say-so in this. So when they meet the potential spouse, they have some sittings and gatherings with them, they get to know them. If they're not attracted, if they don't want to move forward, they could say no. They don't have to accept. It's not forced, right? So would you like to add anything?
I just wanted to say again that we really have to use these opportunities to show how proud we are of being Muslim, because Islam gives us a lot for us to benefit from. The problem is when we don't apply the teachings of our religion, Islam, especially when it comes to the status of a woman in marriage. The level of negative portrayal of Islam in the topic of marriage has become so common where even us Muslims think that forced marriages is very popular in our society. Reality is that it isn't. Because in our religion, Islam, the person who initiates the marriage contract, because Zawaj, marriage, is a verbal contract, the person who initiates the verbal contract is the female, never the male. The person who accepts the marriage contract is the male all the time. So her initiating the marriage, her initiating the contracts, by her saying, Zawajtuka nafsi, I'm marrying myself to you, or her, which is usually our custom, authorizing somebody else to conduct it on her behalf, means that she is the one who is initiating it wholeheartedly and willingly, which means that forced marriage has no place in Islam. Should it be that she is forced into a relationship, we will not consider that, title that as a marriage. It's invalid from its very foundations, and therefore it can't even be classified as marriage. I have a lot to say about love-based marriages, and it really is a risk whether it works out or whether it doesn't work out. Statistically, in most cases, it doesn't, because a person initiated the relationship not based on a pragmatic approach, because I believe with marriage you have to be very pragmatic, not based on a pragmatic approach of whether this person, whether he or she meets the proper requirements for me to be able to live with this person and for him, her to become my soulmate. And in my criteria for spouse selection, I've made sure that this is the right decision. It was all a mixture of emotions and things like that, which is why the third option is the best option, especially for us cultural Eastern, Middle Eastern people, where we don't have those opportunities of free mixing. Our religion doesn't allow free mixing as well. Arranged marriage can be taken with two approaches, the negative and the positive. People usually say, oh, well, my marriage is falling apart. It was arranged. It wasn't my choice. What do you mean it was arranged? It wasn't your choice. You didn't have any say. Then that goes back to the first forced marriage. Or you were too shy to say no. That's your fault. You didn't voice your opinion. That's also your fault. Arranged marriage, as Sheikh Hamid said, is family involvement. Marriage should never be something private. Marriage is something where two families are coming together for the sake of the marriage and the relationship. It's very much similar to trying to find the proper suitor for the person and then coming and introducing to the person, to the son, to the daughter, their foundings. Oh, we've found this wonderful person for you. They meet all of the requirements. There's also that compatibility. What do you think? Last opinion, final word is for you. That's the type of arrangement. Very quickly, I'm trying to be as quick as possible. That's the type of arrangement that we would think to be good and positive. We do, inshallah, have a question and answer session, so hopefully we'll be able to elaborate more on that.
All right. So now we're going to go over just a few things of what to look for in the potential spouse, right? One of the reasons why love marriages don't work out more than half the time is because a lot of times people will sacrifice some of the things that they should be looking for because of an emotional attachment that they have with the person, right? So that's one of the issues. Whereas in an arranged marriage, right, these things should be considered first before they even meet each other. And then when they meet each other, these things were already considered, hopefully, right? If they're not considered, then we'll go into the next part of the lecture. We'll see what happens if we don't consider them. But the first one is religion. So obviously the deen, right? So being a religious person is important, right? And that should be the most important thing that we're looking for, right? The Imam Bakr alayhi salam, he says, if someone proposes to you and you're satisfied with his religion, meaning how he conducts himself in a religious manner and trust, then marry him. Otherwise, misfortune and corruption will spread. So if there's someone who comes to you, he's religious, she's religious, you're happy with their deen, and then for some other reason, they don't have a good enough job, or they don't own a house, or their car isn't the top model of a car, or whatever, and you reject them because of that, even though they had a good religious standing, that's a problem. And Imam Bakr says, if you do that, misfortune and corruption will enter your life. Right? So that not only you miss out in a marriage that could have been great for you, but also negative things might come your way. Right?
So religion here, level of religiosity, it doesn't mean what religion you are. It means being a pious, righteous, religious person. A person who adheres to the practices of Islam, which means when someone is coming wanting your hand in marriage, or when you're looking for a person to want to marry, then you need to look at these two things. Number one, how religious they are, and number two, their level of akhlaq, their morality. How religious they are, of course, not in the public sense, just because they wear a aqiq and they have a nice looking beard, or they have been to Umrah and Hajj and they come from a nice family. That doesn't make them religious. Just because they pray daily doesn't make them religious. Very good, right? But being religious is more than that, especially when it comes to something like marriage. You can be ultra religious as far as your ibadat are concerned, but a stingy person, right? You could be coming from a very good family religious wise, but when it comes to your usage of language, you have a very foul mouth. So religious in its entirety, that's very important. And of course, with the second hadith from the Holy Prophet, it's saying that you marry a woman for certain reasons. What would be the best reason? Not because of her lineage, not because of her wealth, not because of her beauty, but because of how religious she is. Not how religious she will be, how religious she is. Some say, oh, I promise you I'll do this and I'll do that. Give me some time. Rome wasn't built, what do they say? Rome wasn't built in the day. I'll make some changes. I promise you I'll do that. You don't marry someone on who they will potentially be. You marry someone on who they actually are at that moment.
All right, so as Sheikhna mentions, another reason is akhlaq, and that's all right. That's mixed with religiosity as well, right? So when you're looking at religiousness in a total perspective, akhlaq is a very important part of that. So it's good. But Imam Hassan al-Islami says, marry her to a pious man. If he loves her, he will honor her, and if he dislikes her, he will not wrong her. So pious here is mutaki, taqwa, which is religiousness, right? Looking at someone for their religiosity. And in this hadith, it's saying, even doesn't matter how the relationship turns out in the end, even if it turned out that they don't like one another and maybe they even have to separate, right? He won't wrong her.
That's
right?
A very important hadith, actually, very important. Someone came to Imam al-Mujtaba and asked him, who shall I marry my daughter off to? And he said, لِرَجُلٍ تَقِي, to a pious person. فَإِنْ أَحَبَّهَا أَكْرَمَهَا, if he loves her, he will honor her. وَإِنْ لَمْ يُحِبْهَا, but if he doesn't love her, didn't work out, the marriage isn't going to work out, لَمْ يَظْلِمْهَا, he will not wrong her or oppress her.
Right, and the next one, compatibility, right? The Prophet says, marry those who are akfa, who are suitable, and choose for your offspring wisely. And this compatibility could mean many different things, right? And I've seen many different interpretations of it, so I'm interested to see what Sheikh says. But some that I've heard is that you're looking at people from the same status, basically. So in religiosity, it's not one person who's ultra religious and the other one who is barely religious, right? You're looking at people who are similar. Maybe that'll make the relationship better. But I'd like to hear what your thoughts are.
I would say compatibility as far as your vision in life is concerned. What you think of yourself to be with your partner. That's what compatibility means. You could be having polar interests. You could like hunting and hiking and she hates hunting and hiking. You could love kebab and she hates kebab. You could love, for example, watching television and he hates watching television. You could be very social and he is completely antisocial. That doesn't mean that there's no compatibility, right? In a lot of cases, one complements the other when they have different kind of approaches when it comes to these kind of things. Personal preferences must never be dictated onto the other person. You can't force your partner to like what it is that you like. Naturally, you're different. Your personality could also be different. So kufu or compatibility means that you have a synchronized way of how you want to live your life. As far as Sheikh Hamid said, your status is concerned, your interests in how you want to live your life, being religious, wanting to have children, wanting to perfect yourself and perfect each other in your future, wanting to raise your children righteous and religious. Those kind of things are very, very important as far as compatibility. Of course, personality-wise, there needs to be some kind of compatibility as far as personality. For example, if you're a very cold person, and the other person is a very outgoing person, it could lead, if things aren't explained from the very beginning, it could lead to a lot of issues in the future. I'm not saying that personality differences should not be what it is that you choose as far as compatibility is concerned, but compatibility doesn't mean those basic simple things that we usually see on websites like I'm going to say Tinder, don't you? Or things like that, what their preferences are, what they like and what they don't like. No, it's not that. It's something way more than that. Tinder, the chicken place, not the... Yeah.
All right, some other things to look for: family background, simplicity and expenses. So I think the lifestyle you want to live, that'd be connected to the compatibility that the Sheikh mentioned there. And avoid foolish or ill-tempered spouses, and that goes back to akhlaq as well, right? So if someone doesn't have proper akhlaq, they would be ill-tempered, for instance, right? So all of those we've kind of touched upon already, so we'll move on. All right, so why do these matter?
Wait, we haven't spoken about mahar, have we? Or?
We didn't, no. We want to go. Mahar is interesting because you deal with it all the time, so yeah, give a couple stories.
Okay, family background is very important. As this hadith itself says that you need to look at the hereditary qualities of who it is that you want to marry, because that's what your children will bear. The hadith says, اختاروا لنطفكم فإن العرق دساس. Choose for the sake of your offspring, because the hereditary qualities are contagious. It will carry on to the next generation. That's why it's very important to look at family qualities, number one. With number two, yes, I have a lot to say about mahar. I have a lot of stories, ugly stories, shameful stories. We have taken the concept of mahar far, far away from what it really is. And the shame about it is, and I'm using the word shame because that's exactly what Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam uses in describing kathratul mahar. He says, min shu'mil mar'ah kathrata mahriha. The shameful thing for a woman is an expensive mahar. It's not a business. Yeah, she's worth 3 camels, but no. maybe 4, and add a goat to it as well. And that's how people are taking it. That's how people are taking it. Gold coins and money. And they really think that that's what's going to give them happiness. Those who are around me know that 90% of the divorces that I recite, the wife ends up forfeiting all of her mahar anyway. So all of those dramas and arguments and fights over how much she's worth, how many gold coins she's worth, or how much money she's worth, she ends up forfeiting it for her freedom. Mahar, the Quranic word that is used is sadaq, right? Sadaq, from the word sidq, which means truthfulness. It is only a gesture, a token, a sign of his truthfulness in his proposal to you. Has nothing to do with how much he loves you, has nothing to do with your social status or value. It's not a security bond. If things work out, you don't get it, but if things fall apart, then he has to pay you off. It's not some kind of compensation. He broke my heart, now he needs to pay for it. That's why we have taken it way far from what it is that our religion wants. And it's very shameful, because a woman should think that her honor and her dignity can't be bought with money. Usually it's the aunties and the uncles who come and say things into her ear and say, no, why are you accepting that much? This guy's rich, you should be asking for more. That's the only way that you can, keep him under control, by having a high mahar and things like that. And that's why I think it's a very, very important topic. We really need to look at this. And that's also why a lot of young males prefer to go off and get married outside of the community, because when they're asking for her hand in marriage, she says, oh, well, my cousin, wanted 50,000, and that was 5 years ago. With the, with the inflation, I'm worth like 70,000, so take it or leave it. There's 7 other people who are waiting in line for me to say yes to them, so it's your choice. We really need to look into this, and we really need to understand how insulting it is for you to put a price for yourself. That's very, very important. Sorry, Sheikh Hamid.
And just to add on to that, like you mentioned, it's not a security blanket either. And I think a lot of people look at it that way, where if the marriage doesn't work out, then this is what I get, so I could start my life over or whatever. But that's not what meher is for, right? That's not the purpose. And it ends up destroying people and destroying relationships, right? So I don't do marriage counseling, Sheikh does that, but I'm sure a lot of these marriages, because of the high meher, have created problems and tension in the family.
That's why I say, if she's asking for anything more than something that you can pay within 2 or 3 months, run away. Run away. Because she's, what do they call them?
Right.
But some men love it as well. Some men think like it's good for him, like they show off about it. They show off, they say, oh yeah, you know what, I'm gonna pay her this much. And I found this girl and she's that, and she said she's only happy with 1,000, but I'm gonna give her 100,000. Like they like to brag about it. The men are like that as well, I've seen as well. So it's not only the girl's side or her family side, but some of the guys as well. We'll answer all questions later on. What about Urf? What about Urf? No, so when it comes to times of dispute, or at times where it's forgotten what her mahar was. At that time, you look at her social status and what Urf says and what her social status would be as far as mahar is concerned. But in general, it is definitely the rule in Islam that أفضل نساء أمتي, as the hadith says, the best of the women of my ummah, أقلهن مهرا, is she with the least amount of mahar.
Yep. All right. So going back to those qualities that we were looking for, why do they matter, right? And it's a big question, because if you look back to one of the slides before where we were looking at love marriages and arranged marriages, this is where that comes into play. So these qualities that you're being encouraged to give importance to, right? It doesn't mean your marriage is going to be perfect. It doesn't mean that it's impossible that you're going to marry someone and over time you guys are going to change and the marriage isn't going to work out and unfortunately you might get divorced, right? It's not a 100% protection. What it does is it increases the odds or decreases the odds of that happening, right? So if you find someone who's religious, from a good family, good akhlaq, you guys are compatible with one another, the likelihood of it turning into a disaster is way less than if you disregarded these things, right? So that's my understanding, is that's why these are important, is it decreases the likelihood of a negative marriage, right? Would you agree with that?
Yep, absolutely.
All right. So one of the things it could lead to, su'u tafahum, or miscommunication, and this is probably, if you look at all divorces within the community, this is the most common reason, that they weren't able to communicate with one another, right? Now, when you don't have akhlaq and you don't have a good sense of religiosity, those things together might lead to misunderstandings or not being able to communicate well, arguing and yelling and screaming at each other and things like that. So that's one of the things that is a problem. And the Prophet says, a believer is he who lives in harmony with others. Yeah.
So I would, if I could add just an important thing, and that is that you might be a very religious person. You might be someone who has very good akhlaq as well. You know, you might be a very good husband, a very good wife, right? But you lack a skill of communication. It's a skill that we have to learn. When it comes to something like lack of communication, which is probably the most common reason as to why people get divorced, is because you think that by avoiding confrontation with your spouse, or by wanting to stay away from escalating the problem, you stay quiet. Or you want to discipline your partner, you want to teach them a lesson, so you give them the silence treatment. And that silence treatment means that the other person doesn't want to escalate the problem, doesn't want to confront, doesn't want to fight and argue. Too much screaming and shouting in any relationship isn't good. So therefore, they start boxing their feelings. Every time I come and I speak to you, you shut me down by not even thinking about what my concern is. You're not even taking my opinion. And why am I going to have to go through all of this, and then you end up seeing what I'm saying as something petty, and something very small turns into pickering and an argument and a fight? I'm not going to do that again. And therefore, I start keeping my feelings to myself, keeping my opinion to myself. That is where this lack of communication starts to develop. And that's why it's a skill for marriage. It's a skill that you have to learn. Which is why I think for this program that we're having tonight, alhamdulillah, is hopefully going to encourage the young brothers and sisters to take marriage more serious, but also to realize that when you do get married, it's not the end of the show, that there's still a lot more things that you have to learn and improve and gain as a skill after you get married. All of that, of course, goes back to the selection that you made in who it is that you're going to get married to.
All right, another one, facade. So we had this clearly in traditions, right? That if we reject someone that we're happy with their religiosity, it leads to facade, right? Examples could be infidelity, gambling, substance abuse, and you'd be surprised how much of this actually occurs in our communities, unfortunately, right? And it's something that I've seen over and over again, where one of the spouses is religious and the other one is a total disaster in this way, right? And it leads to all kinds of problems. So for instance, if we fall in love with someone and we forego religiosity as one of our prime things that we're looking for because of an emotional attachment we have with someone, then these are the things that we could fall into later on in life, right? And it's something that, as I said, happens way more than you would imagine. Right?
And this goes back to the hadith from the Holy Prophet that if someone comes knocking on your door and you're happy with their level of religiosity and you're happy with their akhlaq, then get married. What are you waiting for? Otherwise, there will be fasad. Otherwise, there will be corruption. Someone sent me a message a few days ago, and it really does show how we have really taken a different direction when it comes to marriage and the emphasis of marriage. How many times have we heard the excuse of, I want to study, I don't want to get married, marriage will affect my studying? That makes absolutely no sense. That makes absolutely no sense. It's rather the opposite. If you do get married, you'll have a clearer mind. You'll have a partner who you will be able to be with, who can help you through your times of difficulty, as far as your exams, as far as your passing of your requirements are concerned. That emotional instability that you have will be completely covered through your partner, through your spouse. Which is why, if you do want to be successful in your studies, get married. Postponing marriage and delaying marriage until after you finish your degree and then after you finish your finding a job, when you hit a certain age, you're no longer going to be that lenient as far as molding your personality for your spouse. That's very important. The younger you are, the easier it is for you to mold your personality for your husband, for your wife. The older you are, the more difficult it becomes. Why is it that we have made marriage so difficult? Why is it that we have chosen to delay marriage as well? Why is it that we have also chosen to be secretive about some of the relationships that we have also? A lot of girls complain about guys DMing them. DMing, is that what they say? DMing them. Why? Why do you think that just because she posted something or just because you found her on social media, you by default have some entitlement to wanting to DM her? فَادْخُلُوا الْبُيُوتَ مِنْ أَبْوَابِهَا. If you are genuinely serious about wanting to marry this person, then do it the proper way. Enter the house through the main door. You don't break a window on the second floor. That's also very, very important. The message that I received when I sent out the poster was, I went to a marriage workshop and the sheikh asked the attendees if you would consider the person that your father recommended to you in marrying them. And by default, every single one of them said no. Yani, if your father comes to you and says, my daughter Azizam, my princess, my Kim, sorry, I'm trying to be serious, but it doesn't work with me. There's a guy, he's this, he's that, he's this, he's that. What do you think? No. I want to do this, I want to study, I want to choose him myself. I want to choose that night myself. So all of a sudden the father has no position in who he would see to be befitting for his own daughter. And that's why Sheikh Hamid said that in a lot of cases, people go off by themselves on their own and make the decision, the most important decision in their life, in who they want to marry, and the last people to find out are their own very parents. And that's what it means here by fasad. That level of corruption becomes so difficult for us to contain, it really, really starts to affect our community.
All right, next one, bad akhlaq, pretty clear. The example here that's given, which isn't the only example of bad akhlaq, but is anger, abuse, creating a toxic environment, right? So if you forego looking for akhlaq in your potential spouse, you could have a negative, toxic household. Yeah, pretty clear. Next one after that is how to manage marriage. This is important. So being kind to one another, right? And helping one another in the home. This one, Sheikh, I think you made a little mistake on the slide, but it's okay. Yeah. So he says, the Prophet helped Lady Fatima in housework as an example of marriage, but we know that that's his daughter, so maybe you meant Lady Khadija. Yeah. And yeah. First time I get to correct him. I could have changed this, but I decided not to just so I could do that. Well, all right, so maybe you could teach people how to be good spouses since you messed the slide up. Go ahead. Teach people how to be kind to one another. Help out in the house.
Yeah, so thank you for blaming me for your mistake, Sheikh Hamid. So it was Imam Ali. There was a agreement that Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam had with Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra as far as the housework is concerned. And this agreement was a very sensible agreement, and it really sets a good example for all of us. We unfortunately grew up in a generation where we never saw, for example, in most cases, the fathers helping in the kitchen or cooking or cleaning or things like that. And in a lot of cases, you know, men have inherited that, right? Also, we have that masculine, what do they call it? Toxic masculine traits and Andrew Tate and all these other things that are coming out, you know, giving people a very wrong direction in how they need to be treating their wives. So this is why I'm saying everything goes back to our beautiful religion, Islam. If you were to read, I asked people regularly, how many books have you read about marriage in Islam? 0. How many lectures even have you heard about marriage and in Islam? Zero. What kind of premarital counseling did you go to? That's something, if I had the authority, I would force that any person who wants to get married, they have a premarital counseling session, 1 or 2 or 3. Understand how to deal with problems that arise. What's your conflict resolution plan? What's your conflict resolution plan? Do you even know what a conflict resolution plan is? These are really, really important things. The last point here, forgiveness and patience, is also very, very important. And that's even what the verse in the Holy Quran says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أن خلق لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا لتسكنوا إليها وجعل بينكم مودة ورحمة. The last of the 3 foundations for a successful marriage is mercy. Irham turham. Show mercy and mercy will be shown to you. Everyone's going to have ups and downs and issues and dramas and problems, but there has to be a level of forgiveness towards one another. Forgive and also forget. Don't say, I'll forgive, but I'll never forget. Yes, when things get really bad, when it becomes bad, abusive, that's when a different direction needs to be taken. But in a relationship, a person always needs to make sure that there's a level of forgiveness and also patience with the other as well.
Right. And then love and loyalty. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, the more a man increases his love for his wife, the more his faith increases. So just because love marriages aren't encouraged, it doesn't mean there's no love after marriage, right? And men are, the more that we love our wives, the better we treat them, the closer we become with them. As the Sheikh said, the better skills that we get in both ways, not just men to women. What's it called? The closer to God you'll become. So it's very important.
So you don't fall in love and then get married. No, you get married and then you fall in love. And gradually. How can you say you're going to fall in love with someone you don't even know? How can you fall in love with someone you don't even know? And if you want to get to know them, how are you going to get to know them? During the time of getting to know each other, he's going to be in his best behavior, she's going to be in her best behavior. Yes, you're going to be, building emotions and feelings and things like that, but real love only happens when you are now with each other, living with each other, working with each other towards achieving those goals and those accomplishments that you want to have in perfecting one another. And that's why, of course, love in our Islamic understanding has to be taken with a different approach when it comes to marriage.
Yep. All right, and this conclusion here before we open up for question and answers. I don't know, you built this one. I was trying to make sense of this, so why don't you put that together?
I built it. Conclusion. What is it? Marriage is the foundation of religion. Why are you throwing everything onto me, Sheikh Hamid? Marriage is built on deen and akhlaq and compatibility. That's also very, very important. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi says, of course, the foundation that a person needs to have and the most loved of houses is a house of marriage. And of course, the worst thing is divorce. Aim for mercy, loyalty, faith, and that is the glue of marriage. Before we open up for questions and answers, I just wanted to mention quick points in spouse selection. So, most of you are single. Put your hands up if you're single. Why you got your hand up halfway? Put your hand up if you're single, please. Well, what about you, Inter? Put your hand up higher. Put your hand up higher. On the girls' side, you're all shy not to put your hand up. Girls' side. All right, up the back, no shyness. Good. All right. Spouse selection. Alhamdulillah. This is all useful for all of us. And that's why I said you have to be pragmatic about this. You have to put your emotions aside. You never get married unless you know absolutely everything about the other person. I don't mean their history, their past, if they've been in a relationship or if that's not what I mean. I mean you have to know that person, their ins and outs. You have to take your time doing that as well, especially in today's society. Number two, you never marry someone out of mercy, that you feel sorry for them. You don't marry them because you feel sorry for them, because he comes from a broken family, because she, is in this situation, because no. You never marry someone to fix them. What usually happens in many families is that the guy is going off track a bit, He's out of jail, he's got a criminal record, he's gone the wrong way, he's then done this, he's done that, right? And the parents say, okay, the only way that we can fix this guy, right, is by getting him married. Adam Misher, by getting him married. No, marriage is not a reform institution. It's not a way where you will be able to fix yourself or fix the other person. You never marry someone who they will potentially be. I promise you, I'll start wearing hijab after we get married, or I'll cut down on cigarette smoking after we get married, or I'll do this, or I'll do that, whatever promises a person makes. That's not someone that you should get married to. You get married not who they are potentially going to be, but who they actually are. Don't get married with someone who has high expectations. I don't only mean high maintenance, I mean high expectations as in that they want to live this kind of lifestyle, or they want you to do this for them and that for them. These kind of high expectations you might be able to meet in the first early days of your romantic relationship. But once that romantic season starts to die down, you become very realistic about everything, and you start thinking about, I can't keep up to his standards, I can't keep up to her expectations. What am I going to do? Don't marry someone who you know is sinning, openly sinning especially. Don't marry someone to prove love as well. If you really want me, if you really love me, you should marry me. No. You shouldn't marry someone also who has, we could say, some concerning issues as far as their mental health are concerned, which you know will affect your relationship. High level of depression, or he's got OCD, high level of waswasa, or someone who is always suspicious, shakkak, always suspicious. Who are you talking to? Why did you go out? Why are you 15 minutes late? And these kind of things. Overprotective. Protective is good, But overprotective, that's very, very, very dangerous. Because the first opportunity that they have, they will accuse you of something. All of these red flags you can easily pick up if you're using your brain and not your hearts. Someone who's a mummy's boy. What does that mean? What does that mean, Mehdi? Mummy's boy. What does it mean? Bacha nane. What does it mean? What does it mean? You all know what it means, don't you? Or someone has too much dramas in their life. Too much dramas. Oh, my uncle did this and my cousin did that. Too much dramas going on. Say no, thank you. I'm not interested in that. Because all those dramas, you are going to inherit yourself. And also, finally, my final advice, very quickly, inshallah. If there are anyone who has anything else to add, that would be good. Someone who's too much obsessed with themselves, self-absorbed, too much, what do they say, up themselves, right? Self-absorbed, always thinking about themselves, right? Always thinking about, how they are and who they are and what they are, and they have to iron everything all the time. That is really, really, really something that you need to, I had to say that, sorry, something that you really need to avoid. Did you want to add anything else? So, if anyone has any comments first to add, something that we probably didn't mention, and something that you think is important, or we can open up for Q&A. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So no questions, and that means that everyone knows what they're doing. Yeah, well, we have to look at what our religion says about being an introvert. Just by using these kind of words doesn't make it a good thing or a bad thing. Our religion, Islam, encourages us to be neither. Don't be all the way out there flashy. I have an article about this on my website. Don't be all the way out there, always loud, noisy, socializing, over socializing. That's not good. And also, don't be such an introvert where you become an antisocial person. Find the midway. If you are on this side of the extreme, bring balance to yourself. If you are on that side of the extreme, bring balance to yourself as well. As far as marriage is concerned, if you're not in any of the two extremes, but you are an outgoing person and the other person is not that much of an outgoing person, that's fine. You don't need to be exactly the opposite as far as your personality is concerned. That's really something that's unrealistic to want in a partner. But if you are on one side of an extreme, yes, it would create a lot of conflict for both sides, definitely.
Also, if it's in the extreme, if you're on the same side, it's not great either.
That's
so
right.
if you have two extroverts who are extremely extrovert, that's going to be a disaster. And two introverts that are extremely introverted, that would also not be great, right? So some kind of differentiation is important, but the extreme, I guess, only when you're in the extremes would that really make a difference. I guess if there's questions, raise your hand so we could see you. Yep.
Age is a common question that people ask. I would usually say that a close age range is better than a very large age range. Something either of the same age or him being maybe 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years older is fine. More than that depends on the personalities from both sides, of course. But the closer the age range, the better it is. Yes, Ali. So the topic of marriage is something that every family needs to discuss, even before the time comes. Let's say, for argument's sake, a family have certain preferences. We want our child, right? We want you, my child, to marry within your own culture. We don't want to marry outside of our culture. We don't want to marry outside of our village. We don't want to marry outside of our city, right? Or we only marry, for example, what's something usually common, Sayyids, marrying Sayyids, for example, right? Don't marry a non-Sayyid. These kind of conversations, whether I agree with them or not is different, but these kind of conversations are very, very important because that's what the person is going to know as far as his or her expectations. The important point is marriage is not just an individual decision. You don't go on your own and sideline everyone in your family and choose who you want to be with for the rest of your life, and they be the last people that find out. Because you think that by doing this, you're proving your independence and you're also going to be making the right decision. That's what family involvement means. Where you go to your parents and you say, Mum, I want to get married, and your mother starts hunting for a good girl for you based on the requirements that she believes is right, but you've also adjusted, right? She might say, no, my son, you're not going to get married unless I see her and she's this and she's that and she's this and she's that. So she has all of these requirements for who she wants her son to get married to, but he doesn't want that. He's not looking at that. He doesn't care what color her eyes are or how tall she is or how short she is. But the mother wants to force that onto the son. That's when there needs to be proper negotiation from both sides to make sure that she's hunting in the right direction and it's something that he would be happy and pleased with ultimately. As far as the girl's side is concerned, the same thing. She can't take it upon herself to start interacting with a person just because he DM'd her, right? And falling in love with him. She doesn't even know him. She's probably seen him in the mosque. She's probably seen him at university or something like that. And then after them building an emotional relationship, she starts to think that it's now time for me to break the news to my family, and an all-out war erupts at the household because of that. She knows very well, and he knows very well, that the approach that needs to be taken should never be an approach of secrecy, but always approach of doing it through the proper, correct avenues. Of course, at the time where the father is always rejecting proposals, someone came and asked for her hand, father said no. Another person came, father said no. Another person came, father said no. That's very bad. That's very evil. But it doesn't give her the right to take it upon herself to make the decision away from family involvement. That's why on both sides, family needs to be involved. And ideally, it's all about communication and honesty as well. Be honest, be direct with who it is that you wish to get married to, and also trust your parents' judgment as well. Your parents, in general, might see things with different eyes, might see things in different ways, might say, no, he's no good for you because I know his uncle is this and this and that. And you might say, well, I'm not marrying the uncle, I'm not marrying the mother, I'm not marrying the sibling, I'm marrying him, I'm marrying her. No, you are marrying the family. And the best evidence for that is whenever a divorce happens, is it only the husband and wife that have issues, or it's the whole clan, not only the family? That's why it's very important to make sure that families are involved. Well, if she knows for a fact that he's doing it out of spite, or he doesn't really have a proper justification, or he's waiting for his brother's son to reach age because he promised to give his daughter to his nephew 60 years ago, that's when she needs to take a different avenue. So if she knows that it's unjustifiable, unacceptable, and what do I mean by unjustifiable or unacceptable? If he says, I don't want my daughter to marry someone from a certain nationality, we can't say that that's unjustifiable. You might not agree with it, but that's the parent's preference. The parent says, I want to keep us, us family, we want to stay within this tribe, we want to stay within this city, for example. Whether or not I agree with it is different. But he has the right to say that. He says, we know our culture, I want to preserve our culture, I want to carry on with the legacy of our culture, and therefore we're only going to marry within our culture. But in the case that someone really meets all the requirements, as you said, and another person meets all the requirements, and she's also inclined to that kind, that's where I would suggest some kind of intervention happening. The mother speaking to the father, an elder, the local sheikh, something happening where it doesn't have to erupt into a war, and sometimes the father could even end up becoming violent towards the daughter by him thinking that she's becoming insolent and she wants to marry someone, and how shameful it is for her, and what are the people going to say, and all of these other things. So containing this kind of situation is important, but she should somehow voice her concern about this. Yeah. Yes, sister. give the. So someone who does have mental illness, or someone who does come from a broken family, what happens to them? Should they not get married? No, definitely they should get married. Everyone should get married. Everyone should get married, right? But are you going to marry someone at the risk of having a lot of problems and issues in the short term and in the long term because of the dangerous baggage that he is coming with or that she is coming with? Are you able to fix those things? It's a risk. It's a big risk. You might be able to fix them, you might not be able to fix them. Should you show sympathy to that person? Of course we sympathize with these kind of people. But that's why I said marriage should never be out of mercy or sympathy. Marriage needs to be based on you knowing what kind of person he or she is. If they're unstable, how are you going to risk getting married to them? What kind of security do you have that they're not going to turn violent against you? That they don't start to abuse you? So even though we feel sorry for that kind of person, and you want to get married to that kind of person, but then you come to realize that he or she have inherited all of these things and they're now acting upon it towards you. Why did I say never marry a mummy's boy? Because that's what narcissism is. Would you marry a narcissistic person? He's a nice person, he's a polite person, he's a good-looking person, right? Ironing his clothes all the time by himself, right? But he's a narcissist. Would you marry him? No one would. Red flags are important. Red flags are very, very important. You have to look at the red flags and never, ever compromise for the sake of pleasing others. Even if it means pleasing your own parents, never compromise. Oh, I'm doing this for mum. I'm doing this for dads. You know, they promise them that, you know, I'll marry him because he wants to come to Australia for a better life, and, you know, I'm able to sponsor him through spouse, what do they call it? Spouse visa. It's not how it works. That's not what marriage is.
One question, just to ask a question though, from the other side, right? So you're asking it from the person who's looking at someone with a mental illness or looking at someone in a broken family. What if you're the person that has, you had depression, for instance, because of a negative event that happened early on in your life, or your family, your parents divorced, you have a broken family, some people in your family do bad things, but you're doing your best not to. How do you present yourself in a way where you can find someone to marry?
Something that would affect the relationship. Just because they have some issues that has happened, just because, for example, their parents are divorced. I wouldn't say, you can say broken, but I wouldn't say that's a broken family. Some children of divorced parents are very stable, are more stable than children that could come from parents who are still living but very, very abusive. What I'm saying is, how much of it is going to affect the relationship? That's very important. That's very important. If someone has what do they call it? PTSD, right? And you're trying to, you know, manage him. You're trying to manage her. But it's taking a toll on your own mental health as well. It's affecting you as well. Instead of you being a very calm person you used to be, how many times have I heard this from couples? I used to be a very calm person. I used to be very calm. But now I'm becoming like him. I'm becoming like her. Because that's the only way of how I'm going to be able to manage my relationship? That's what I would say is very, very important to see how much of it is really going to affect your relationship. What would you say?
I mean, I think it's definitely that's something to look at. So, what we were talking about at the beginning with all these qualities is to mitigate risk. And there's definitely a level of risk if a person comes from a family that maybe their parents are on drugs or something that's negative, right? Or they're a convert and their parents aren't even Muslim and who knows what they were doing in the rest of their family. So there is a level of risk there that you'd have to gauge on a individual by individual basis. But the person who comes from that family or who has struggled with a variety of different mental health issues and they've overcome them, right? Then they present themselves in the best way they can. They go to the masjid, they be religious, they ask Allah for help, and inshallah someone Allah will help them to get married.
Yeah, and that's why I said that marriage will not give you immunity. It won't make you a perfect being straight away. You could be married and then later on, develop very, very bad traits. You could be someone who's come from a very good family, someone who has zero issues, and then all of a sudden flip for whatever reason because you're not paying attention to yourself because of this or because of that. Doesn't, of course, allow the other side, the spouse, the husband or the wife, to say, well, it's okay, when we first got married they didn't have this issue, but now they have this issue, I'm still going to stick with them. No, that's also very, very dangerous for them to carry on with that kind of extremely toxic relationship. Yeah. Yeah, just let her finish. That's why I said, sister, that it's a skill. Marriage is a skill. Why don't we read about it? Why don't we learn about it? Why don't we develop that skill? Marriage doesn't start when a person just finds who it is that they're doing and then that's it. Marriage is, I've done what I've done. No, even as I read from the hadith, فَلْيَتَّقِ اللَّهَ فِي النُّصْفِ الْآخَرِ, you have to be wary of God in the second part of your life. So now that you're married, you've fulfilled half of your religion. The next half is making sure that you're conscious of your conduct and your behavior and you're responsible and you have accountability. That's very, very important. Some people get married and they've done their proper investigation prior to saying yes, and they've made sure that they've chosen the right person, but then he or she starts to develop very bad negative traits. Or years later, you come to realize that I still don't really know who this person is. They're still not opening up to me. I still can't understand, I can't decipher this person. It's very difficult for me. Do people change? Yes, people change a lot. Sometimes to the best, sometimes, unfortunately, to the worst. All of that goes to how you've been managing your relationship. How did you allow yourself to carry on with the spouse? Did you ever use certain tactics or certain approaches that have a damaging effect, like the silence treatments, for example? You shouldn't be treating each other with silence. That's not a good thing. I have dealt with Couples, 12 years, not one word they spoke with each other. It was always the communication with them through the messenger, through their child. 12 years, not one word. Go off and get divorced. What the hell are you doing? That loveless household is more damaging to the children than anything else. But how did that start? How did that start? Because no one sat them down and taught them that when you have a problem, when you have an issue, don't raise your hand, don't use foul language, don't stop talking to them. This is the approach that you need to take. That's why I'm stressing on the importance of learning skills and managing the relationship. That's very, very important.
I heard the Jihad that they said that a woman reaches her maturity, the height of her maturity at 30, and a guy at 43. What if they've passed that age and one person has become self-aware and the other person is still in denial, totally in denial about their behavior, personality, and everything, and all the things that they're doing that's affecting the other person in a very negative way.
And that's also why it's always important to try to learn from an early age how to mold yourself.
But that's not possible.
It's very possible. The earlier you get married, the easier it is for you. The earlier you get married, the easier it is for you, as long as you have proper guidance. Elders always need to be involved. And there's a difference between involvement and interference.
Yeah.
There's a difference between involvement and interference.
But not everyone's fortunate enough. Like, I don't have my parents here.
Yep. That's
sometimes one of the person in the marriage, they're like you spoke about before, that they're very stubborn and they don't want to hear like nobody's they don't want anybody to get involved, or they don't listen to anybody because they think that they're right. In this case, what is the spouse supposed to do? Like, you try everything, you seek every avenue.
The Quran
that's available
says
to you.
حَكَمٌ مِّنْ أَهْلِهِ وَحَكَمٌ مِّنْ أَهْلِهَا. The Quran gives a solution to this, that there needs to be an arbitrator from his side and an arbitrator from her side. There has to be intervention. Someone has to intervene to save the relationship, to save the marriage, for their sake and also for the children's sake as well. That's very, very important. Sister, you wanted to say something? Yeah, that's a good example. That's why you have to say Bashar Chagu. Yes.
When they say that romance or nasib is like rizq, can we have doubt about a nasib existing, and how can we overcome that doubt?
So, unfortunately, these words are very misleading. Qisma, nasib, none of that really exists when it comes to marriage. You can't say that you've made a wrong choice, willingly made a wrong choice, and you say, oh, what can I do? That's my nasib. No, that's not how it is. That's not how it is. Marriage is not nasib. It's not like, for example, I don't know what to do, whether or not I am going to be receiving this or not receiving that. Even with rizq, rizq is also not nasib in that sense. With rizq, you can't be sitting down on the couch and saying, oh, it's okay, my rizq will come my way. With nasib, you can't be making the wrong choice and then later on blaming it on nasib. That's not how it is. And that's why we don't believe that with marriage there is qisma and nasib. Yes, fate and destiny is always going to be there for everyone, but marriage needs to be made by choice, not by what you think is your destiny and this is the person that was written for you and you have nothing to say about it. No, you have everything to say about it. Yeah. Yes.
Salam, sorry. I just wanted to ask about Salat al-Istikhara. Some people do it, and I wanted to know your viewpoint. When should we do it, and if we should do it?
So it's a good, definitely it's a good method for us to use when we're in doubt, but some people use it right away when the second someone's name gets introduced, let's do istikhara, and whatever happens. That's definitely not when you should use it. So the way you use it is after you've thought about it, right? So you think about the issue. In this case, it's marriage, but it could be anything. And if you're 50-50, you're not even leaning to one side, then you go and you do mashfara, and you go and you consult with people who are knowledgeable. So you consult with the members of your family in this sense for marriage, or leaders in the community, or whatever the situation entails. And you listen to that advice, and if after that advice you're still 50-50 and you can't lean any bit on one side, then that's when istikhara would be applied. So when you use it, that's my understanding. Maybe the Sheikh has a different one, but when you use it is very important.
So in marriage, istikhara shouldn't have any place or position. Istikhara with marriage, okay, maybe some people resort to istikhara if they're really, really two-minded about something, about someone, right? But your evaluation of who the person is can't be based on istikhara. It needs to be based on investigation. It needs to be based on looking into the person, making sure that you've verified the level of integrity that they have. In the olden days, they used to send spies to the person and monitor them for days on end and see their ins and outs and where they go and what they do and who they hang around with and things like that before they even give the person an opportunity to come by. That's why it's really, really important to turn to looking at all of this, using your brain, using your intellect, and making sure that you have put all effort in knowing what kind of person he or she may be. Yes. When do we finish?
I think, look, let's take this as the last question, and then we'll be closing.
So that does go back to compatibility. I have had this discussion with a lot of couples where they think that he's not that intellectual for me. You know, I opened up I asked him about what his opinion is on Palestine, and he changed the subject and he said, oh, you know, what are you watching on Netflix or something like that. Marriage isn't about having intellectual discussions, right? A husband and a wife, if they end up having just always ongoing intellectual discussions and always talking about these kind of things, they're going to end up being very, very bored with themselves and with each other's. Marriage and a relationship is not friendship. Marriage is not friendship. Marriage is more than that. There are things that you do with your friend. There are things that you there are ways that you interact with your friend that are different than the ways that you interact with your spouse. And they are different than the ways that you interact with your neighbors. And that's different than the way that you interact with your family members. For example, you could easily say to your friend, you know, you're idiot, you know, you're dumb, you're stupid, right? but you're never going to say that to your husband, right? So there are certain boundaries that you have with your family members, or would you? There are certain boundaries that you have with your family members that are different to your friends, that are different to your spouse. A marriage shouldn't be based on what level of IQ he has or what level of IQ she has, because that's not going to determine that strength and bonding that you have with each other. It doesn't mean that you marry someone who's dumb or completely off grid and has absolutely no idea about anything, but it doesn't mean that when a husband and wife are living together and they are raising children together, in most cases, they usually don't have intellectual discussions with each other. They leave that for when they're going out somewhere or in certain occasions or things like that. Yeah, that's what I would say. Before Sheikh Hamid finishes, something that I would recommend is this book. I translated this years ago, 2014. How to make my wedding halal. One of the big issues after the spouse selection and everything else is the ceremonies that you have. I genuinely believe that the reason why we have such a high rate of divorces, close to 65-70% divorces, is because the very basis, the very first days of their marriage was haram. The very first days of their marriage was surrounded by haram. The hadith says that Baytul Ghina, a house of singing, a house of music. Number one, لا تؤمن فيه الفجيعة. That calamities, you can't secure yourself from facing misfortunes and calamities. ولا تستجاب فيه الدعوة, and your dua won't be accepted. ولا تدخله الملائكة, and angels won't descend and enter as well. You're starting off your marriage, you're starting off the most sacred day of your life with makeup and mixing and atan, and it's one of their thing, and dancing and singing and all these other haram things and free mixing, and you really expect that angels are going to be present. You really expect that your living Imam Ajjalallah Ta'ala Farajuh Sharif will bless that marriage of yours? Really? That's why I always say, do something where you can proudly say, Alhamdulillah, I really have a feeling that my Imam is happy with me, that I'm doing this. I've broken all of these bad cultural practices. I'm not inviting 600 people. I'm doing all of these good cultural practices. Alhamdulillah, I'm 100% sure that this is all Shari'i compliance. That, I think, is really, really important, because it's not only the spouse selection that's important, but how you manage everything afterwards. Thank you.
Please recite the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali
Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And another one for the blessing of Sheikh here.
We will finish off with dua.